Hello everyone, Namaskar. I welcome you all to What Watch India, and we keep you updated with the recent developments in Indian energy ecosystem. So recently we covered a video on renewable energy certificates and how the trading and exchange for compliance of renewable purchase obligation of the obligated entities is done through it. If you have not watched that video, you could go to our playlist. It is available there. And in continuation of that, recently there has been much discussion about the VPPAs, which are full form of which is virtual power purchase agreements. So in this video, we are going to discuss the draft regulations that have been floated by the central regulator CERC regarding the VPPAs and how exactly they will be executed and what benefits they are going to accrue for our obligated entities for consumption and purchase as well. So let's get started. So if we talk about the national renewable energy targets and the renewable consumption obligation framework, which is the RCO framework, two things emerge. That as a part of our climate commitments, we have already committed for a non-fossil fuel based capacity of 500 gigawatts by 2030, which is probably going to be achieved very soon. And in addition to that, under the Energy Conservation Act of 2001, there is a minimum share of non-fossil based energy consumption on certain obligated entities or agencies. It was notified. So those obligated agencies which were having a certain capacity of consumption over the certain threshold and which were hard to abate industries, which were energy intensive industries, they were mandated to consume certain requirement of their electricity only through renewable energy sources. So now this RCO or renewable consumption obligation as we call it is applicable to the distribution licensees, open access consumers and the captive users as well. So there was a penalty for non compliance with the RCO obligations under the act. Now there are two options for fulfilling these obligations for the obligated entities. One is by directly entering into a PPA or buying from the green day ahead markets from the power exchanges. So directly renewable energy being consumed, or if certain geographical factors inhibit or some other process based requirement inhibits the obligated entity to not be able to directly consume the renewable energy, they can also fulfill through the purchase of renewable energy certificates, detailed mechanism of which has already been covered earlier. So the renewable energy certificates can be used to offset the carbon emissions, and by paying a certain fees for each renewable energy certificate, the obligated entities can claim that okay, I was not able to purchase directly the green power, the renewable energy sources, but I have bought certain RECs through which I am offsetting my fossil fuel based consumption. And as I said, that non-compliance leads to penalties. This is similar to the renewable portfolio standards in the USA, in which the RE procurement is mandated on certain entities. So this is in line with the global trend. So now how VPPAs, virtual power purchase agreements, fit into this whole equation? So based on the global best competitive practices, VPPAs are proposed as a new compliance mechanism to meet the consumption obligation by the obligated entities. They are already very common in US and Europe that enable large corporations like Google, Microsoft to decarbonize their financial renewable energy support without physical delivery of electricity. So they can just enter into a virtual power purchase agreement, modalities of which we are going to discuss in the further slides, and support the renewable energy transition of the entire ecosystem. Now, before we go into the modality of the VPPA, there is a jurisdiction that has to be clarified, because in terms of the contracts, there is an entity known as SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, which also oversees the overall compliance framework of this. But SEBI has clarified that through its letter dated 31st January to CERC that VPPAs by their definition are bilateral, over the counter, non-transferable and non-tradable contracts. So under the definitions of Security Contracts Regulation Act, on which the SEBI has supervision, these, by virtue of this definition of VPPA, these VPPAs basically don't fall under SCRA and then in turn fall into the CERC jurisdiction as non-transferable specific delivery contracts. Now all these terms like bilateral, OTC, non-transferable, non-tradable, specific delivery, each of this term we are going to discuss in detail, so just stay tuned. Now going into the definition of what VPPAs exactly are. Like we said, they are bilateral, over-the-counter, non-transferable, non-tradable, NTSD contracts, non-transferable specific delivery contracts. We'll see each term one by one. So VPPAs are bilateral. Bilateral implies that two parties have agreed to come into a contract and certain specific terms and conditions are being set regarding the supply and delivery of the electricity or any other commodity. OTC is an acronym for over the counter. So these are contracts that are transacted outside the power exchange. These are transacted between sellers and the buyers directly or through a trading licensee. So in power exchange, we have standardized contracts of electricity delivery where the generators will bid for the power, will bid for the supply for the power, and the consumers will bid for the requirement of the electricity, which will then be matched. And so that is a standardized contract, whereas OTC is a over the counter mechanism in which two parties can enter uh, custom made bespoke contracts based on their own specific requirements of demand and supply, and those are outside the ambit of power exchanges. Those are governed through the OTC platform that is also recently notified by the CERC. So these VPPAs are non-tradable. That means it cannot be bought or sold to a third party. There is no secondary market of these. Once it is executed and between two parties, both the parties are obligated to fulfill and honor. It cannot be sold off like we do the trading in our share market and exchanges, equities. And it is non-tradable, it is non-transferable. Rights and obligations cannot be sold, assigned or transferred herewith. In addition, VPPAs are NTSD, like I said, non-transferable specific delivery contracts. So what does specific delivery mean? If we go to the proper textbook definition of specific delivery that is given under the Securities and Compliances and Regulation Act, it means a commodity derivative which provides for the actual delivery of specific quantities or types of good during a specified future period at a fixed price or at a price to be fixed in a manner agreed upon, and in which names of both the parties and the seller, both the buyer and the seller, are mentioned. So specific delivery implies the commodity is specified, the time at which it will be supplied to, by whom it will be supplied, and who will be taking the delivery. Everything is specified, and that gives it the name through its nature, the specific delivery. Now here in the definition it calls types of goods. Now here the definition virtual power purchase agreement, it is virtual in the sense that there is no transaction of electricity physically between the parties that have entered into VPPA. Here there is no physical exchange of electricity, but environmental attributes, which is the renewable energy certificates that are generated through the production of that green energy, only those are transferred to the buying party in the VPPA. We'll discuss this now in further detail so that it is clear in a more better way. So sale mechanism and REC transfer. So in a normal power purchase agreement, power purchase contract, be it bilateral through a PPPA or be it through a power market, physical delivery of electricity is mandated because otherwise there is no contract. But here the word virtual in the power purchase agreement implies that it is a there is no physical transfer of electricity. Only the environmental attributes in the form of renewable energy certificates are transferred to the parties. So in a way, the parties are not, the buying party is not taking the electricity, but is only subscribing to the energy attributes, green energy attributes that are generated through the generation of such green energy. So now generator has the option. Now generator, for example, if we take a 100 megawatt solar power project, the developer, the generator will sell the electricity via power exchange through the day ahead or the real time markets, or any other mode which is specified by the regulator. And after selling, once the electricity attribute is sold off, there is an REC generated against each megawatt hour of that electricity. So those RECs which are generated by virtue of production of that solar energy are transferred to the consumer, with which the generator has entered into a virtual agreement. And these RECs are not tradable. These are to be directly transferred to the buying party. It acts as a financial hedge for both the parties. It is not a physical power contract. So what do we mean by that is, these currently renewable energy certificates, if a party is willing to buy them, it is traded through the power exchange, and those the rates over there are balanced by the forces of supply and demand. But here, if we enter a virtual power purchase agreement with a generator, the RECs will be transferred at a fixed price. So it acts as a financial hedge for the buyer of the RECs as well as to the seller of the RECs. And it is not a physical power contract. It is to be understood very clearly. It is virtual in the sense that there is no physical power contract. There is no physical delivery of electricity. Now, VPPAs can be signed either directly by the two parties, contracting parties. It can be signed through a trader, or it can be signed via an over-the-counter platform that has to be registered with CERC. That RE project, which is going to be generating electricity and transferring in turn the environmental attributes, it must be registered under the REC regulations 2022, which have already been covered. Now, the electricity that is generated can be sold to the day ahead market, real time market, or any other mode, and REC from such sales goes directly to the consumer. We already discussed that. Contractual nature of this VPPA is that it is non-tradable, non-transferable. The parties are bound for the entire term in the sense that it is not transferable, and this clause upholds the stability of renewable consumption obligation linked VPPA commitments, and it prevents any speculative trading, because once the agreement is signed, both the parties are bound to buy and supply the environmental attributes in the form of RECs. So there is no speculative trading. Now, there is a defined market price in this. Market price in the sense, say electricity generated at 3 rupees per kilowatt hour, at rupees 3 per unit. So now, like we discussed, the power would be sold at the power market or any other authorized mode. So if the generator is able to get, say, 3.5 or maybe 4 rupees per unit, but the price that has been specified in the agreement is 3 rupees, so that 1 rupee that has been additionally earned will be compensated to the consumer in the agreement. Similarly, if the market price is lesser than the VPPA price, the consumer will in turn pay to the generator. So it acts as a financial hedge, protecting both the buying party and the selling party. Now, renewable energy certificates. There are projects under VPPA eligible for RECs if they are registered under the REC regulation. So REC regulations specify the kind of projects, how they have to register with the central regulator and the nodal agency to be able to claim those RECs further from the nodal agency against their generation of green power. Then there is direct transfer. The RE generator must transfer RECs directly to the consumer, with which it has entered into PPPA. Extinguishment procedure. So I have received, as a part of my VPPA, certain RECs from the generating entity. I will inform the REC registry, which will then extinguish those RECs. So they will be considered as used up to claim my renewable consumption obligation. So this is the overall framework. It is a very, I must say, adaptive and forward-looking framework that has been proposed currently by the central regulator CERC, and it's definitely opening up market for new kinds of technologies and new kinds of commercial settlement mechanisms through which two parties are able to fulfill their electricity requirements, meet the forces of demand and supply, hedge against the market forces, and as well as support the green transition of the Indian energy market. So I thank you all for joining in, and see you in the next video.